right, welcome back, and welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and of course, there's a lot of things to consider today as it comes to global alliances. What is Russia, China, and India doing these days as it relates to the president's foreign policy, and in particular that between Russia and Ukraine? Very timely to have back with us today Bill Walton. He's the known as the Unwoke CEO. He's the host of the Bill Walton Show. He chairs the Resolute Protector Foundation, which is a 501c3 media production company, and creates and produces original educational entertainment content. He's also formerly chairman of the Tea Party Patriots. In 2016 and 17, he led the agency's action and landing teams for all of the federal economic agencies for the President Donald J. Trump. Presidential transition team. He does have a website, thebillwaltonshow.com. There's the picture of the landing page, thebillwaltonshow.com. Bill, good to see you again, friend. How are you?
I'm doing great, Perry. Thanks for having me back on.
You bet. Well, listen, we're watching with great curiosity the alliance of Russia, China, and India, and the president's now approach to those three based upon not only what's happening in Ukraine, but just overall their impact in the world. What's your thinking?
Well, I think the thing that brought this into high relief was that there was a conference about 3 or 4 weeks ago, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which has been around for 15, 20 years with a lot of the countries in the eastern part of the world, and most notably China, Russia, and India are major players there. I think the president of Iran was also there, and the president of Turkey. And so that gathers a lot of very significant countries. And we saw was very interesting that the reception before the conference, or as the conference was starting, informal. And we had a visual of Vladimir Putin walking hand in hand with President Modi of India, gleefully or happily smiling, and then going up to President Xi of China, who was also, his body language was also warm and welcoming, and the three of them stood and chatted as if they were long lost friends. Now, almost all your viewers who know history, India and China and Russia have a lot of conflicts with them over the last several centuries, and they haven't resolved that. But one of the really pernicious effects of the Russia invading Ukraine is that it's driven Russia into the hands of the care and feeding of China. And they've been sustaining themselves by selling oil and gas not only to China, but also their oil and gas to India. And it's a strange bedfellows arrangement where India is a democracy, China is a totalitarian Soviet state, and I think Putin's Russia is sort of a wannabe imperial czarist empire, and so they're now working together. And the other thing, well, I'll stop there. There's a lot we can go into.
Well, I guess where I want to go with this, Bill, is that Russia's been has been poking a lot lately about what's going on over there, flying drones over Poland, actually invading the NATO airspace. All of this is quite serious. My question to you is, do you think the president in time will have to put some kind of sanctions, if not limitations, on China and India?
Well, President Trump has decided to use tariffs as his preferred economic weapon, and he slapped 100% tariff on India. And China they're yet to negotiate the final outcome. It's interesting for somebody who has declared themselves an implacable enemy of the United States. We haven't quite finalized those tariffs, and they're sort of last in line as to what we're going to end up doing. Yeah, I think there will need to be some sanctions, some tariffs. What President Trump is doing, though, is sort of tactically clever, maybe strategically clever. He's telling the European countries, and India and anybody else who wants to end the war in Ukraine, look, you also have to slap sanctions and tariffs and stop doing business with Russia. And until you stop doing business with Russia, the United States is not going to be doing anything. So he's thrown the I say not anything, but not as much as they would like him to do. So he's thrown the responsibility back to Europe, and they're not ready to shoulder that burden. So it's hard to know where this is going to end up. But they don't have the economic might, nor their militaries are frankly, I think the UK military is smaller than it was at the time of the American Revolution. It gives you some feel for how prepared they are for warfare. So he will, but it's up in the air. And I think President Trump has been very disappointed. He thought he had a relationship with Putin that would transcend all this, and instead of Putin going along with Trump's desire to wrap this war up and stop the killing, as he puts it, and we should stop the killing. He's opted to send drones into not only Ukraine, but I think Poland and some of the other verging on NATO countries. So this is Putin's has a way of being provocative right back at you.
So, are you surprised that Russia's been at this going on 3 years? They haven't been able to bring this war into a landing, which has indicated that Russia's military is a whole lot unsophisticated than everybody thought it would be. It doesn't seem to have the power or the might to finish the job.
Well, I was in the camp that thought Russia was going to wrap this thing up in 10 days. With the numerical advantage they had in tanks and armor and everything else that would be put into a modern land war, you'd think that this thing would be done. Instead, here we are over 3 years later, still dragging it on, and the amount of territory that Russia's taken is pitifully small relative to the resources they put into it. So yeah, they've revealed themselves to be, what they used to call the United States, that Russia's revealed itself to be a paper tiger. And whether their lack of progress is because they don't have the resources or because Putin's holding something back, we don't know. But it's a mystifying development, and I think in part he may not want to wrap up the war in Ukraine. It may be benefiting him up to this point, although, as I say that, their oil and gas assets that they've had, they're selling it, and it's dwindling down. And so if they start dipping deeply into their reserves, Russia will have really nothing strategically to bargain with except its nuclear armament.
Were you surprised with the president coming out, basically doing a 180 with Ukraine and telling them, let's get this working with NATO. You need to get all your land back. That's quite a statement.
Yes, I was. And there's a lot of posturing in that statement. It was one of the longer Truth Social statements he's made. And in there, that's where he called on the European countries to be involved in this and show their support for this resolution, which they're willing to offer rhetorical support, moral support, but not really anything that counts in terms of winning a war. So he's still, even with that, he's still leaving the resolution of the war up to Ukraine and up to the Europeans backing them up. And I don't think that's going to happen. So while it sounded very supportive, he didn't deliver the goods in terms of helping them win the war.
So ultimately, I realize the Russian people are going to really suffer here, because wherever the pressure is applied, it shows up to the peoples. That's got to weaken Putin's position at home. But he's also getting troops from Korea to help fight the war. I mean, the whole thing seems to be unwinding on him. But if the president does put economic pressure on China and India, and he's also putting pressure now on the EU, NATO nations, to quit buying oil from Russia, he could bring them to their knees economically probably within hours.
Well, he could, but again, China has options that we don't really think about. And I wrote a piece for Blaze media not too about this, and China now is selling an awful lot of its manufactured goods. Well, it was selling a lot to Europe, but now that's now more and more going to other countries in Southeast Asia. And whether this is primary goods sales or whether it's parts for them to re-export and hide the fact they're coming from China, you don't know. But they were double what they were just 7 or 8 years ago in comparison to U.S. exports, and so their options. And the world has changed a lot from Trump 1.0. We've got to pay attention to the fact that half the world's population, if you drop a pin in the map around northern Vietnam, southern China, and that region, and take it out a couple thousand miles, you capture half the world's population and almost 45% of its economic activity. And we don't think about that, but those countries are doing very well, and they're growing, and they're beginning to emerge on the stage as actors on their own. They're no longer just dependent third world countries. That's happening as we resolve this debacle in Ukraine, and the rest of the world's moving along. Now, just as a footnote for that, China's also exporting its TikTok app to these other Asian countries, and they're using, as I understand it, TikTok is being used in sort of color revolutions in these other countries, and so they've got a bone to pick with China, who's also disrupting, their governments. So it's a complicated, messy world. I'm glad we've got Trump at the helm. I think he understands this complex pattern, but I think he's been surprised that through his force of personality, he hasn't been able to wrap it up.
So where does this go, Bill? I mean, one of his motives is to stop the killing. Sooner or later, he's going to have to take some dramatic steps to stop the killing, and that means ending that war. That means putting pressure on Putin now, because he obviously has shown his hand that he doesn't want to cooperate.
Well, I'm in the camp that thinks that we should stay clear of anything that resembles military commitment to Ukraine. We've already done that, in effect, through selling most of our. We've also sold down most of our own arsenal, and the cupboards are almost bare. So in terms of conventional warfare, our resources are dwindling, and so. There's now. When this all started, there was all this. We were all concerned about a nuclear outcome, and now that seems to be back on the table, where all the combatants seem to have run through their conventional weapons and their conventional economic weapons, and now we're left with something more stark. I don't know. I mean, somebody's going to have to be the grown-up here, and I know that Trump would play that role vis-a-vis Europe, but whether he can do it and bring Putin around, I don't know. But you're asking me a question I wish I could answer, but this is something where we've all sounded very smart over the last 3.5 years about it's going to go this way or that way. Yeah. And so far, I don't know what my batting average is, but it's not very high.
Do you think Europe, in the long run, understands they need to stop funding this war? I mean, I realize that Ukraine is the buffer between them and Russia. You've got NATO playing a big part, but if they would just cut in half their reliance on that oil, it seems like to me that would be a big deal.
Well, Europe has already impoverished itself through its their own version of Green New Deal. They've shut down nuclear and they've shut down coal, and Germany's producing, I think, 15 or 20% less electricity than it was even 5 years ago. And there's an unreality here. I mean, we talk about elites in the world, the Davos crowd, and all that sort of thing. Well, I think the EU and most of the leaders in NATO, not the United States, but the European countries, are suffering under the delusion that they are still, able to call the shots. And the elites are really out of touch with what's going on the ground, and they're also out of touch with populist movements that are growing inside their countries, which really want to wrap this war up. If they took that draconian measure to cut buying oil and gas from, I guess, I don't know. Oil and gas is very interesting, very tricky. It moves all over the world. It doesn't go from A to B. It goes from A to D to G to Z to whatever, but final destination. And then at the same time, Russia's cut a deal to build a pipeline with China. And so, as I've been saying, the realignment that's taking place here is very ominous. And that they brought India into this with its democracy, and Trump's exacerbating it with 100% tariffs on India. I think Trump's done many, many things that are smart economic policy, but I don't think tariffs are among them. I know he says his favorite best word in the English language is tariffs. I don't agree. I think it's
yeah, a lot of people,
particularly in the case of India, it could come right back to hurt us.
A lot of people believe that, and I get that. I guess that's going to be in the hands of the court here coming up in a few weeks.
Yeah.
What do you think?
And well, I think these tariffs are illegal. I don't think he has the right to declare them as imperially as he has, and he's prone to do that sort of thing. But I think if you follow the letter of the language of the law, he's got to get Congress involved, and I think that's where we're going to end up. Now, whether he'll abide by that, jury's also out on that.
Okay. Check out thebillwaltonshow.com. That's the website. That's where also you can check out the show. There's a picture of the landing page, thebillwaltonshow.com. Bill, you're fascinating. Thank you. Thanks for your deep thinking.
Great questions. Great questions. I hope we get a good resolution from this.
Me too.
Yeah.
All right. See you later.
We're counting on it.